Breaking news from the US-Canada border that could reshape the future of North America's most precious resource. Canada is now issuing stark warnings to the United States over Great Lakes water rights, and what we're witnessing could be the unraveling of 117 years of peaceful water cooperation between these two nations. We're talking about 20% of the world's fresh surface water hanging in the balance. What's actually happening behind closed doors? Why are Canadian officials suddenly concerned that the Trump administration might terminate century-old treaties? And what does this mean for the 30 million Americans who rely on Great Lakes water every single day? In this analysis, we're going to break down the escalating diplomatic crisis, examine the legal frameworks at risk, and show you exactly how this conflict could impact everything from your drinking water to the $6 trillion Great Lakes regional economy. Stay with me, because this story is bigger than most people realize. Here's what just happened. The International Joint Commission recently released a critical report recommending that both the United States and Canada uphold the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Basin Water Resources Compact. That might sound like bureaucratic language, but it's actually a warning shot. Then, the Trump administration made an unprecedented move. They disinvited two Canadian mayors, Montreal Mayor Valerie Plante and St. Catharines Mayor Matt Cisco, from the annual Great Lakes Day Summit at the White House. This summit has been a cornerstone of bilateral cooperation for decades. The mayors were removed just 48 hours before the event, citing diplomatic protocols. But here's where it gets worse. According to reporting from the New York Times, President Trump told then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in private conversations that he didn't believe the treaty demarcating the border between the two countries was valid. Trump specifically mentioned revisiting the sharing of lakes and rivers between the two nations. We're talking about treaties established over a century ago, agreements that have kept the peace between these nations. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Throughout his campaign, candidate Trump repeatedly claimed there was a giant faucet of Canadian water that could be turned on to address California's water crisis. Canadian engineers and water experts immediately debunked this claim, but it revealed something crucial. Trump sees Canadian water resources, including the Great Lakes, as something America could simply access. The centerpiece of this potential crisis is the Boundary Waters Treaty, which created the International Joint Commission. This treaty explicitly states that no diversions of boundary waters can be made without approval from both nations. The treaty can be terminated, but it requires 12 months written notice from one party to the other. Canadian water advocate Maud Barlow, founder of the Blue Planet Project, put it bluntly. Trump has made it clear that his Monroe Doctrine sees all of the resources of North and South America as his by right, and he will take them when he needs them. He could just stick a pipe or two in the Great Lakes, and who is to stop him? Let me give you some context about what's at stake here. The Great Lakes system is not just any body of water. We're talking about Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, 5 interconnected lakes that together hold 6 quadrillion gallons of water. That's 21% of the entire world's fresh surface water supply and 90% of the United States' fresh surface water. The surface area covers 94,000 square miles with 4,530 miles of coastline. More than 30 million people in both the United States and Canada depend on the Great Lakes for drinking water every single day. The economic impact is staggering. The U.S. Great Lakes region alone generates $3.1 trillion in gross domestic product annually and employs 25.8 million people. When you include the Canadian side, the total Great Lakes regional economy is valued at approximately $6 trillion. This supports a $5 billion fishing industry, robust manufacturing sectors, tourism, agriculture, real estate, and recreation industries. Over 200 million tons of cargo moves through these lakes annually, contributing 293,000 jobs and $17.3 billion to the regional economy. Now let's talk about the legal architecture that protects these waters. The foundation is the Boundary Waters Treaty, signed between the United States and Canada when it was still under British rule. This treaty created the International Joint Commission, a binational organization with equal representation from both countries. The IJC has one clear mission: prevent and resolve disputes over shared lakes and rivers. For over a century, this system has been held up globally as the model for peaceful water management between nations. The treaty contains explicit language. It states that no further uses, obstructions, or diversions of boundary waters on either side affecting the natural level or flow on the other side can be made without approval from both nations and the IJC. This has been the bedrock principle. Neither country can unilaterally decide to divert or significantly use water that affects the other. But here's the kicker. This treaty can be terminated. The treaty allows either party to terminate it with 12 months written notice. If that happens, the International Joint Commission disappears. The requirement for mutual consultation disappears. The legal barrier preventing one nation from diverting Great Lakes water without the other's approval disappears. On top of the Boundary Waters Treaty sits another layer of protection: the Great Lakes Compact, enacted by the 8 Great Lakes states: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Congress approved it, and the president signed it into law. The compact bans new or increased diversions of Great Lakes water outside the basin with very limited exceptions. Only communities that straddle the basin boundary can apply for diversions, and they must go through a rigorous review process. The compact has worked. In its years of existence, it has successfully prevented large-scale water diversions. The IJC's recent report specifically recommended that states and provinces continue upholding the compact. But there's a vulnerability here. As we've seen with other policies and regulations, the Trump administration has selectively enforced U.S. laws. There's no guarantee the compact would be honored if the administration decided Great Lakes water should flow elsewhere. Then there's the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, which commits both nations to restore and maintain the health of the lakes. The Great Lakes Fishery Commission coordinates management of invasive species, particularly the destructive sea lamprey. All of these agreements and institutions are interconnected. They depend on bilateral cooperation, shared data, joint research, and mutual trust. Compare this to historical precedents. In the Western United States, water conflicts have defined state relationships for over a century. The Colorado River Compact has been a source of ongoing disputes as Western states fight over diminishing water supplies. Arizona and California have been locked in legal battles for decades. The difference? Those are disputes between U.S. states under a single federal government. The Great Lakes situation involves 2 sovereign nations. If cooperation breaks down, there's no higher authority to arbitrate. It becomes a matter of international diplomacy, or worse. Experts are particularly concerned because water scarcity is intensifying globally. Climate change is creating prolonged droughts in the American Southwest. California has faced severe water shortages. Nevada, Arizona, and other states are desperately seeking new water sources. The Great Lakes, holding 20% of the world's surface freshwater, start to look very attractive. Trump's repeated references to a giant faucet aren't random remarks. They reflect a growing pressure to access northern water resources. And it gets worse. The broader geopolitical context matters here. Let's break down who gets hit if this bilateral water management system collapses. American workers and families face immediate risks. In cities like Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Erie, water infrastructure is built around Great Lakes access. If diplomatic tensions lead to restricted access, or if Canada retaliates with its own water restrictions, municipal water systems could face supply disruptions. Water treatment facilities in these cities process millions of gallons daily. Any interruption means potential shortages for households. Think about what happened in Flint, Michigan when water systems failed, except now imagine that risk multiplied across multiple major metropolitan areas, affecting tens of millions of people. Farmers throughout the Great Lakes Basin depend on this water for irrigation. Michigan's agricultural sector alone, heavily dependent on water access, contributes billions to the state economy. Wisconsin dairy farms, Ohio crop production, Minnesota agriculture all rely on consistent water availability. If political tensions lead to usage restrictions, or if one nation begins unilateral diversions affecting water levels, agricultural operations could face devastating impacts within a single growing season. Small businesses will feel the squeeze. Consider a small brewery in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Water quality and availability are essential to brewing. Tourism operators across the region, from fishing charter companies to marina owners to lakefront hotels, depend on healthy lake ecosystems. If binational cooperation on managing invasive species breaks down, we could see rapid ecological deterioration. Remember, the Sea Lamprey Control Program already faced disruptions when U.S. federal workers were initially furloughed, delaying critical invasive species management. That was just weeks of disruption. Imagine permanent breakdown in cooperation. Large corporations with Great Lakes operations are watching this closely. The automotive industry in Detroit and surrounding areas uses massive amounts of water in manufacturing. Steel production in Indiana and Ohio requires enormous water volumes. Data centers, which are increasingly locating in the Great Lakes region specifically because of water availability for cooling systems, have plans for facilities requiring billions of gallons. In fact, a recent report from the Alliance for the Great Lakes projected that hyperscale data centers could withdraw as much as 150.4 billion gallons of water over the next 5 years. If international tensions restrict water access or create legal uncertainty, these multi-billion-dollar investments could be jeopardized. Stock markets have already shown sensitivity to US-Canada trade tensions. Throughout recent periods, tariff disputes caused volatility in Canadian and American markets. Water rights conflicts would add another layer of economic uncertainty, particularly affecting companies with cross-border operations or heavy water dependencies. International partners are paying attention. The European Union, watching Trump's threats toward Greenland and his dismissive attitude toward traditional alliances, sees the Canada situation as a test case. If the United States is willing to unilaterally dismantle century-old water treaties with its closest ally, what does that mean for other international agreements? Other nations sharing transboundary water resources from the Middle East to Southeast Asia to South America are watching to see if international water law still matters. Expert warnings have been clear. Mike Schreiberg, a University of Michigan faculty member specializing in Great Lakes policy, stated that water and resources don't recognize international boundaries. You cannot manage invasive species, harmful algal blooms, or water flow information from just one country. Jérôme Marty, director of the International Association for Great Lakes Research, warned that behind all this might be the idea that one country could simply take water out of the Great Lakes and manage it not as an ecosystem to be preserved, but as a commodity. Rachel Havrlock, a University of Illinois Chicago professor who directs the Freshwater Lab, put it plainly, this is the most stable, productive, and mutually beneficial form of binational water governance on Earth. We cannot let this be sacrificed. The ripple effects extend across multiple sectors simultaneously, creating compounding vulnerabilities. Let's look at what experts and officials are actually saying and what the legal and political implications are. Maud Barlow, a prominent Canadian water justice advocate, captured Canadian sentiment. We are very well aware that not only does Trump see our natural resources as his, he has disdain for liberal democracies such as ours. Trump has made it clear that his Monroe Doctrine sees all of the resources of North and South America as his by right, and he will take them when he needs them. She added, Canadian feeling against Trump is morphing into something larger, and you hear people angry at Americans. That last point is crucial. This isn't just diplomatic tension between governments. There's growing anti-American sentiment among ordinary Canadians who feel their sovereignty and natural resources are being threatened. That public opinion shift could have lasting consequences for bilateral relations that extend far beyond water policy. From the U.S. side, Brian Hughes, a spokesperson with the National Security Council, responded to questions about Great Lakes cooperation with this statement. President Trump has made clear the need for Canada to stop ripping off the United States on trade. President Trump will explore any and all actions that put the interests of America first. Notice what's missing from that statement. Any commitment to upholding existing treaties or maintaining cooperative water management. The key legal implications are stark. If the United States provides 12 months' notice to terminate the Boundary Waters Treaty, the International Joint Commission ceases to exist. At that point, neither nation is legally barred from diverting Great Lakes water. There's no requirement to consult the other country before taking action. The entire framework of shared governance collapses. Water becomes a unilateral resource grab rather than a cooperatively managed ecosystem. The political implications are equally serious. Canada has already responded to Trump administration tariffs with counter tariffs. While some were removed, tensions remain high. Water conflicts would represent an escalation to an entirely different level. We're not talking about trade in goods and services anymore. We're talking about access to a resource essential for human survival and economic function. Several members of Congress from Great Lakes states have begun speaking out. There's bipartisan concern, particularly among representatives from Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and New York, that federal actions could undermine state-level water protections under the Great Lakes Compact. Looking at short-term effects over the next few months, watch for continued exclusion of Canadian officials from bilateral meetings. The U.S. administration may continue reducing staff and funding for agencies that coordinate with Canadian counterparts on Great Lakes issues. The NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory has already lost significant staff through resignations, retirements, and firings. In the medium term, over the coming months, we could see the first formal legal challenges to the Boundary Waters Treaty. If the administration believes the treaty is invalid, as Trump told Trudeau, they may seek to renegotiate terms or provide termination notice. Let's recap the three most critical points. First, the Trump administration is questioning the validity of century-old water treaties with Canada, creating the first serious threat to Great Lakes water governance in over a century. Second, 30 million people's drinking water and a $6 trillion regional economy depend on continued bilateral cooperation that is now at risk. Third, if these frameworks collapse, there is no legal mechanism preventing unilateral water diversions that could trigger ecological disaster and international conflict. The key takeaway: we are witnessing the potential dismantling of the world's most successful model of transboundary water management, and the consequences will affect every person and business in the Great Lakes region. Here's my question for you. Do you think international water treaties should be protected regardless of political tensions, or should nations prioritize their own water security above diplomatic agreements? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay informed on stories the mainstream media won't fully cover, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell icon for notifications on every new video. Water conflicts have historically led to some of the most intractable disputes between nations, and we may be watching the beginning of exactly that scenario unfold in North America. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.